guys, it's Olivie Blake, and this is me not writing. Okay, so I had initially filmed a video when I was at Comic-Con, and then immediately a lot of the things that I said in the video proved to no longer be true. For example, the book that was going to be called Kiss Your Devils in Los Angeles is now going to be called Dreamland. This is for a variety of reasons. One is that there was potentially a regional issue with focusing the title on Los Angeles. But I felt that just Kiss Your Devils was not a strong enough title on its own. And also the original title, when it was in progress, there were actually a variety of titles. This book was first Hollywood Gothic, and then it was Fire Season, and then it was Dreamland with the subtitle Dreamland or Kiss Your Devils in Los Angeles. And so then I was like, you know, we have Claire and the Devil coming out next year. Maybe that's too many devil titles. Let's walk this back. And we went back to Dreamland, which is my way of referencing LA without yelling that I'm referencing LA. So there was that I wanted to change. I also had talked about how I was reading Veronica Roth's next book that I didn't think had been announced. Now it has been announced. It's called Seek the Traitor's Son. It's really good. I also, when I recorded, I referred to it as a fantasy novel, but it's not as fantasy as To Clutch a Razor, which is, I'm doing an event for her later this month. So if you want to come to Barnes & Noble at the Grove, September 15th, I believe. And, but so it does have that very Veronica Roth dystopian like fingerprint, but it has also the feel of an unrecognizable world and a fantasy world. Anyway, it's really, really good. I highly recommend it. An Arcane Inheritance by Camilla Cole, I mentioned in an interview recently and got the date wrong. That's coming out in December of this year. It's really good. It's dark academia. It's definitely, if you enjoyed Babel, I think you'll probably also enjoy An Arcane Inheritance. I don't want to spoil anything, but it does do something really cool and unexpected. What else have I read? I just finished Nowhere Burning by Katrina Ward, which was excellent. I mean, I love Katrina Ward, and I've said this many, many times. I feel like there's usually an exuberance to Kat Ward's books, something that's sort of off-kilter and eccentric. And I would say this one is maybe a little bit more straightforward in terms of horror novels and not really knowing what is true. So in that sense, it's a little bit more like Looking Glass Sound than, it's more like Looking Glass Sound and Little Eve than Sundial or Needless Street. One book that I talked about in the video that you have not seen that I should probably stop referencing, Blob, A Love Story by Maggie Sue, which I thought was so good. It's very it's got a very messy main character. Like if a main character that was written by Mona Awad or Otessa Moshfegh found a sentient blob, that's basically what this story is, but it spoke to me specifically as a biracial Asian woman. It captured a lot of what that experience feels like. This is super late, but someone asked me if there was any chance that I could bring Girl Dinner arcs when I went to the Biennale in Rio. This is obviously so long ago and I'm so sorry. And so this is just a reminder that I don't have a lot of arcs. I don't personally send out arcs. I know that people tag me when they receive their arcs, but those come from the publisher, and the people who receive them live in that publishing region. And so the reason that American publisher arcs don't go to Brazil is because Brazil has its own publishing region. And I understand that translations are obviously hard to come by. There has to be a market for it, and it doesn't always translate. Publishing is a very complicated web of things. But I just like to remind people that authors typically don't have a bunch of arcs. We get sent a couple. I don't walk around. I still get a lot of people who ask me if I have some sort of underground vault of books that they want. I don't have things. So yeah, I actually have a publishing question later. So actually maybe I should just do the publishing thing now. So curious how books being listed on the bestseller list actually affects the life of an author. Financially, is there a huge difference in the numbers of copies sold for the books of yours that hit these lists and those that don't? Does this translate to a marked pay difference for authors? Or not, because traditional publishing pays up front and authors still need to earn out advances to get royalties. I feel like you're doing this backwards. I mean, books end up on the bestseller lists because they are bestsellers, because they sell a lot of copies. Yes, the New York Times list is editorial, but you still have to they can't just make it up. Like they are still choosing from books that are selling in high volumes. I will say that there is a pretty big difference between the adult New York Times list and the YA, like adult to YA, like 10 to 1 maybe in my experience, just like massive differences. These financial questions, is there a huge difference in the numbers of copies sold for the books that are on the books that are bestsellers. They sell a lot more copies than books that don't hit the list. But there are other lists that matter too. I mean, the USA Today list is just like, it's just sales numbers. Same with the Sunday Times list. It's just numbers. So those things matter. An advance is not like a random number that publishing assigns to you based on like nothing. Basically, it's all part of this. It's not, I make jokes about sales being like an oracle that we like whisper to the oracle, like, hey sales, like, what do you think about this? But when it comes to determining the advance, that's basically like an Excel calculation as far as I understand. It's the publisher deciding how many copies they think this book will sell, and then they determine your advance from there. So, I mean, I think that generally, the hope is that the author will earn out their advance, that they will sell as many books as the publisher wants them to. I mean, I don't think that I know that there are some approaches to publishing where people make it seem like an advance is a totally random number. And it's true that publishing can be wrong. Sometimes publishing can think that a book is going to sell really well, and so they give too high an advance and it doesn't earn out. Or, publishing undervalues a book and it goes way beyond, and that's fine. And when it comes to so my first advance for My Mechanical Romance was a pretty standard, like a pretty good, but pretty standard advance of about 30,000, something like that. I have this whole thing where it's almost a superstition. I try not to engage with money. Like obviously I need to keep track of my finances, but I don't fixate on dollar amounts almost pathologically. It's a whole thing. My therapist and I have talked about it. I have this aversion to talking about money, and so sometimes these numbers just like slip out of my head. But it was something like 30 or 35,000. And My Mechanical Romance did not sell a huge amount of copies. It did pretty well, considering it was a small press. It was on the Goodreads. It was nominated for the Goodreads like YA, I don't know. So, it did fine, but it sold about that much. Like that advance was appropriate for that book. Basically, if the publisher thinks that you will hit a bestseller list, they will give you a much larger advance. But it's not, I feel it might be my interpretation of your question, but it's not as if those numbers are like randomly chosen. That it's a projection of how much they think you will sell, which if you're a debut, then they're basing that on other debuts that have your same tropes or same marketing angles. Or this is why I've talked about this before when it comes to querying, but this is why when you're querying, you need to give comps for books that have been published in the last 5 years, because that means those are books that are being published within this same publishing market, so that the agent and the prospective publishers can determine how well they think your book is going to do if you're a debut author. If you're not a debut author, then they're basing it on your past sales, which can be really hard if you're, say, a sophomore author and you don't have, and your first book like maybe didn't do as well, who knows. That's the part where it's kind of a question mark, and that's where things can get sort of complicated. I think for a debut, it's a pretty simple calculation of like, this book will probably hit the market in the same way as these books, and that's how the valuation is determined. And then, but the hope is always that you will sell a bunch of copies. Like every publisher wants to sell books. So I don't want to approach publishing as if it's this like conspiracy, even though there are, when I was trying to be published, I did have a lot of complaints because publishing is an industry. It can be exploitative. All industries can. It's not very diverse, which can be a problem because you have to get through all the gatekeepers who are predominantly white and straight. It's not a perfect system, but it is based in logic. Book tours. Who decides if these happen, where you go, or what you do? The publisher decides, if you're going to tour. Not that many authors actually tour. I think it's like less than 10% of authors. where you go and what you do, that is also determined by the publisher. But essentially what happens is that bookstores pitch the publisher with the event that they would like to have. They estimate how many people would be present, where they would host it. They pitch, this is what they think the book tour event would be, and then the publisher chooses from there. When it comes to my tours, it is usually a question of where have I not been, which regions have I not been to. Sometimes there is an effort to like send me to new regions, because part of the appeal on a book tour is that I will bring in new readers. It's kind of the opposite of what they do in music, where music, they're gonna send you to the biggest place where you have the most fans. And book tours, not really. The point of a book tour is to bring new people to the books. That's also kind of the appeal of being on panels and stuff like that. The assumption is that a lot of people are there to see one specific author and might walk away thinking, maybe now I'll read your books as well. Does the publisher cover the cost of these? If it's a publisher-sponsored book tour, then yes. Is there a special incentive for authors to do them? I assume that the reason we do them is because they translate to more sales. I will definitely say that at every event, there's someone who has bought the book who probably would not have bought the book otherwise because their friend dragged them or they decided to come to this event or whatever. I don't know how much that translates to an increase in sales, but if it didn't, they wouldn't sponsor a book tour. For me to want to do a book tour, it is the opportunity to see people in person and to actually talk to people and to talk about the book. For the publisher, the incentive is always sales. Okay, also, do you get free copies of your own published books forever? No, you get a pre-contracted amount. So I used to get 25 copies according to my contract. I would get 25 copies of each book from my US publisher, 25 from my UK publisher, and then any translation, 5 copies, which I published a lot of books. That was way too many. So I've cut that number down substantially because I just can't house that many books. And if you want, this is again in the contract, it's up to your agent to negotiate. If you want books beyond that, I think you get a discounted, at very least a wholesale rate. So without the retailer markup, I think you might additionally get a discount. I think if I really wanted more copies, I could probably just ask, but I have not gotten to that point yet. Basically, everyone is trying to make money. We are all just little slaves to capitalism. And it's true that some authors are more rewarded than others. But the way that publishing works is that the big authors kind of keep the lights on for the little authors. That like, there are some authors who are gonna write weird stuff, are gonna write award-winning but doesn't sell very much kind of stuff. There are mid-list writers, which are basically writers who get to put out a book every year and they have a career, but they maybe can't be full-time or they aren't bestsellers. And then there's the big names that are that are definitely going to sell substantial amounts of copies. And because the publisher is relying on those sales, then they are able to kind of take risks on the smaller authors. So it's a system that is not perfect, but I do think, like, I have a lot of faith in my publisher. And, you know, it's one of those things where I came in as this sort of bookish social media sensation, and so that has it has afforded me more opportunities than an average debut author. And I know this because I would have debuted in 2022 as just a pretty normal mid-list YA author, if not. I think there are a lot of people who are angry with publishing when they're really angry with the market, because you can't predict the market. No publisher can predict the market. You can't force the market either. People would just want what they want. And people buy what they buy. And it's true that publishing is one of the industries that's just gonna like throw money at what people are buying at that moment. And almost always they will oversaturate at some point, like it will bloat. I've talked before about how the publishing market cycle is about 5 years. So in that, like, you know, midpoint, that's when you get this huge influx of like a lot of things. It happened with, you know, paranormal romance after Twilight and all this stuff. So to when you get that, that's because publishing is predicting what will sell based on what has sold, which means they're always going to be a little bit backward. There's always going to be a point where they're just throwing money at something, and to the consumer, to the consumer and to the artist, it doesn't feel great. But until we come up with a smarter oracle, this is what it is. And the best thing that I say to people is read diversely, because publishing is just responding to what it sees as demand. And so, you know, your bookish social feeds those algorithms are prioritizing, you know, thin young white women. So those are the books that everybody sees, and people are going to buy the things that they've heard of, the things that they've seen. So, you know, the best thing that you can do to show publishing, like, this is the kind of material we want, is to buy it, to check it out at the library. You know, I know this is specific to Americans, but the Libby app, you can read ebooks, you can listen to audiobooks, all this stuff. There are many different ways to indicate the art that you love, but I think it helps to read diversely, which is something that you do have to do on purpose because of the way publishing is. Hi, Olivie. I kind of have a long-winded question. I really want to get an agent and have my stories traditionally published. It's a goal of mine that feels abstract, as I haven't set a date to try and start querying or to even get a project to a point where it's ready for agent review. But with my anxiety disorder, finishing projects can be paralyzing, and even more so when I realize how seriously I want to take my work to reach my goal. I don't have a plan, and that's because I'm scared to fail. I worry that I won't be able to hit a deadline I give myself, or that my work just isn't there yet as a newbie writer. But I would hate to miss my chance to be published traditionally, as I worry the landscape is changing. The landscape is always changing. Like I just said, every 5 years, it's a completely different market. You can never bet on the market as it currently is, so don't bother. Just throw that out. I guess I wanted to ask, how did you know you were a strong enough writer and were ready to put your books out there? I remember you saying you self-published while querying. How do you turn a goal like being an author into a set plan that's less abstract? And do you have any advice for decreasing one's fear of writing and failing? Honestly, this is where I remind you that I'm not a mental health practitioner. And so some of this, I think, is work that you have to do with your anxiety, because I don't know that you need a plan. I mean, certainly it helps to be organized, but the first thing that you need is a finished manuscript, which it doesn't sound like you have. So at this point, I would just say the way that I write and the way that I teach other people who are looking to me for advice to write is to just finish that first draft. You tell the story. The first draft is you telling the story to yourself. I don't pre-write, I don't plan ahead, I don't know what the story is about until I've already finished it. And then once I finished it and I go, oh, that's what the story was. Like, truly, every time I finish a book, I'm like, oh, that's what I was doing that whole time. I don't really know while I'm in it. And then once I finish it, then I go back and I polish it. And the thing is, as an artist, you will always ask yourself, is my work good enough? You will always ask yourself that. And it's this weird alternative pattern between, I'm a genius, I'm an artist, this is incredible, nothing like this has ever been done before, and I'm a hack, I'm a fraud, I don't know what I'm doing, this is terrible. And you just kind of, one of the skills to being a working artist, and I specify working artist because of course you can always make art for yourself, but if you want to be paid for your art, one of the skills that you need to become good at is recognizing you've done the most you can with this project and it's out of your hands now. I'm very good at that. It's why I can be so prolific. It's because I know when to move on. And that's something that I learned over time, I think. It's just, part of it is that I'm easily bored. And so once I realize something, I've taken something as far as I can take it, then I move on to the next project and I try to make the next project better. I always try with my next project to do something different, to do something I was not able to do in the previous project, something I did not have the skills to do in the past that I now do, or I try to, innovate and do something different. And a lot of that is because I'm an easily bored creative and I want to do something new all the time. Not everybody feels that way. I know there are lots of people who could get really precious with their manuscript. Lots of people love to edit those first pages over and over and over again. But perfection is not going to happen in art. Art is not about the product. Art is about the process. You are going to be told that your work isn't good enough Your whole career, if you go into a creative career, there is not any point that I can see my name mentioned on the internet without seeing that somebody hated it, that someone thinks I have no talent, and their opinion has to simply not matter. I cannot be afraid. I cannot afford to be afraid. You cannot make art if you're afraid. And so on some level, this might be a conversation that you need to have with someone who specializes in anxiety. It might be some, like, you know, I don't know how to tell you to wrestle with your anxiety because I don't know how severe it is. I don't know. This is a conversation that is probably many conversations, because you will always feel anxious about your work. You'll always feel anxious about not knowing how it will be received. I am freaking petrified about what people are going to think about Girl Dinner and whether they're going to understand it. I really think that they might not. A lot of people did not understand the point of the Atlas series, and I have had to kind of take those blows. I've taken my lashes and I'm moving on. In terms of making a plan, I mean, a rejection forces you to do something, right? So when I queried novels and they didn't go anywhere, or if I tried to like submit it for pitch wars or whatever and it didn't get any attention, then I would just self-publish it. Because what do you do with a no? You move forward. You take the beating and you get back up. And so for me, my way of dealing with the no was, okay, I'll self-publish. I felt the work was good enough. There were at least a couple hundred people who agreed with me each time, and that was enough for me, and I just kept moving forward. But I will tell you, you're worrying prematurely. You don't even have a rejection in hand yet because you don't even have a finished manuscript. So finish your project. I think you'll know if it's good enough or not. If you can read that and think, yeah, I'd pay money for that, great. Yes, this is the thing I wanted to make. Move forward with it. If it's not, write something else. No words are ever wasted. Art is not the product. This is the whole thing. This is why AI art will not be art, because the art is not just the final product. It is everything you went through to get there. It's everything you learned, every word you cut, everything you polished, you revised, everything you decided didn't fit. That all goes into the product. The first draft is not the book. A book is, yeah, a book is all the choices you made to make this book, you know? That's a separate rant though. Couple of quick questions. Does the inner high achiever kid in you ever feel melancholic in any way about dropping law? You know, it's funny. I got asked a couple of questions about regret, and I'm going to answer them both here, although they're very different. So do I regret dropping out of law school? No, but of course I can say that now. There were lots of times after I dropped out, like immediately after I dropped out of law school, where I was trying to be a writer and I wasn't one. It was basically just failing at lots and lots of things in a row, and I definitely asked myself, like, should I have just, as much as it made me miserable, should I have just kept going? Now, as a New York Times bestseller and blah, 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 it's easy to say like, oh yeah, I don't regret it at all. And it's true, I don't regret it, except the only thing I regret is that these are very charged political times in the US, and on some level, you know, I'm really, I mean, ICE is just horrific. I hate the things that I'm witnessing, especially here in LA, and I do wish that I had a law degree because I feel like I could be more helpful. I have some lawyer friends who do, you know, pro bono immigration work, and I wish that I had the skills to do that. But at the same time, I don't think I could have been a lawyer. I don't think that that was really the right career for me. It's just kind of the hazards of, this is something I kind of vaguely wrote into my Mechanical Romance. It's just kind of the hazard of being a smart girl or a high achieving girl. People are like, well, you should be a lawyer. And if you're, you know, if you're good at math, they tell you to be an engineer or a doctor, right? And that's it. It was definitely really hard at the time. My immigrant family was very, very disappointed in me. But this is what I mean about, like, when I was talking about art and how you can't do it if you're scared. I think in order to do something meaningful, to accomplish anything extraordinary, it takes a lot of bravery, and I do not regret that. The other thing, I thought this was very funny. Someone asked me if I regret any of the books I have published, and they specified the Atlas Complex. And you know, you guys know I have complicated feelings about, not about the book. I stand by that book 100%. That book accomplished everything that I tried to accomplish. I regret the circumstances in that the Atlas 6 reached a lot of people at a time when book talk was synonymous with romantasy. And so a lot of people went into the Atlas 6 thinking it was a romantasy series, and it isn't, and it was never going to be. It is a dark academia series. It is a series of psychological thrillers. It is about power and exploitation. It was never going to end well. And so on some level, I do regret, it's not even regret really. This is one of the pitfalls of publishing. I can't control the way the book is marketed. Publishing's job is to sell a book as if it's for everyone, even if it's not. And the Atlas 6 was never going to be for everyone. It was always going to upset people. And I knew that. I just didn't know how to warn people. The thing is that, like, all of this turns on what people wanted from Libby and Nico. And I was pretty open about Libby having a corruption arc. And not a lot of people understood that I didn't mean like a girl boss corruption arc, that she was gonna like be bad in a purely aesthetic way. Like, she becomes a villain, and she weaponizes her victimhood, she weaponizes her pain, and the whole thing is an allegory for conservative feminism. And when I wrote the binary stars line, a binary star system always ends in mutual destruction. So all of this was there. I have no regrets about the Atlas Complex. I stand by that book 100%. I regret that I felt so, I think I've allowed myself to feel sorry for myself for a little bit too long. I think I had a real struggle while I was writing Dreamland, because it was like, what if everyone hates me? What if I have no career from here? What if this means that, like, you know, I used to be this sensation and now I don't know. What if I lose all that? What if TikTok giveth and TikTok taketh away? But, you know, this is what I mean. You cannot create from a place of fear. I don't think I ever really had it in me to please the market. And it was never really my goal. So I have to believe that making the kind of art that I want to make will pay off in the end. And I am tired of wallowing about it, so. I don't have any regrets about anything that I've published. I kind of think that, like, One for My Enemy is one of my books that didn't hit the list, and I think that it is most satisfying to romantasy readers. Like, I think if we were going to market a book as romantasy, it should have been One for My Enemy rather than the Atlas series. But I don't get to control these things, and that's okay. The only thing I can control is what I do from here. Okay, let's see. Which Wren sibling do I want to fight the most? Okay, I mean, I will be honest with you. I really love Meredith. I put a lot of work into making her as, like, weird and mean as she is. I loved the fact that, like, one of the things I love about Meredith is she's just like a weird person, right? Like, she's very neurospicy. Her insults are these really specific, like the thing when she calls Jamie a bristleworm, or I don't even know. Like, the point is that Meredith has these very obvious flaws, but I love her anyway because she's trying her best. She's trying her best. She just doesn't have a lot of skills at you know, being a person. And Arthur, you know, there are things that are very real about Arthur. The people-pleasing impulse, just the palpable desire that he has that manifests in this very, you know, sexual energy. Ailey is the one that was just like, if Ailey, on the one hand, Ailey feels the most real to me. Like, Ailey feels like someone that I would meet. And yet I want to just snap her out of it so badly, right? Like, it was actually pretty easy to write all the arguments between Meredith and Ailey, because you could see how they bring out the worst in each other for a long time, until gradually they kind of start to see each other in this good faith. The reason that Meredith and Ailey are, like, really different people. They have really, really different coping mechanisms and survival techniques, and they clearly would not be friends if they weren't biological sisters. But once they decide, I'm gonna stop looking for your worst self, or I'm going to stop assuming that everything you say comes from a place of hatred. I am going to treat you and our differences as if you're a person who loves me and wants me to succeed. It makes this huge difference, right? But which was, you know, it was enjoyable to write those sisters, but certainly Ailey is a frustrating character. She's just sort of frozen, and you know, that's why she has like the worst magical consequence, because she is bottling it up the tightest in a way that is like, oh my God, girl, like nothing good can come from this. Can I explain Dreamland using internet speak or pop culture? I don't. Dreamland, I never get too explicit on the page, which is purely a pacing thing. It's just like, you know, in order to have open door romance, you have to kind of like hit pause on things in a way that's like, if it's a romance novel, the reader is expecting it. But I don't typically write romance novels, so I always end up having to sort of gloss through a sex scene, even though the times being what they are, I really resent being placed on the no spice lists. I feel that the reason I wrote Girl Dinner is that I was alarmed by this undercurrent of conservative energy in social media, right? Like, it's why, you know, the whole like femininity culture calling back to girlhood and purity and clean girls and trad wives, and like, it's alarming. And so I think that this is one of those things where two things can be true, right? Like, there is something strange about the way we approach smut, but can't talk about sex in a real authentic way. I think that there's something especially white feminism coded about books that are like, yes, you can read about sex, but they're gonna end up together, they're gonna get married, there's gonna be this sort of traditional flavor to the way that the sex is approached, as opposed to, you know, true eroticism. And to actually talking about the body. Like, I think we're in a place right now where it's more highbrow to do body horror than to do erotica, in terms of how we're actually relating to sex and sexual politics and sexual identity. At the same time, I think it's very dangerous to say there's too much sex, you know? Once you are allowing people to make a judgment about what is too much sex, or what is bad sex, or what is unacceptable sex, you're automatically putting queer people, trans people, any marginalized person in danger, right? Because anything that is the margins is vulnerable once you decide what is acceptable, which is a super long rant. All I'm trying to say is Dreamland is kind of a monster fucker book, but it's not really, because it's me and I just don't get that explicit, but I wish that I did, because I would love, you know, in this issue, if the world is getting divided into good people and perverts, then please let me stand with the perverts. Okay, this is the last one. I've had these two friends since the beginning of high school. I'm in my second year of university now, and I'm starting to low-key hate them. I feel like I can't be myself around them, and they've sort of put me in a box that I feel like I've agreed to be in. Yeah. Sometimes having history can do that, especially when you're in college and you want to start over. It's kind of like the whole fun part. Anyway, we've also made new friends this year, and they're fine. Everyone is fine, I guess, and they can be really sweet, but sometimes they're so annoying, and their judgment and little comments, and one friend in particular has a superiority complex. Anyway, it's making me resent them, which makes me feel guilty, but also I hate who I am around them. But they're always around, and it's so easy to just spend time with them. It's easy for me to acquaint myself with people, but how do I make actual friends without feeling drained or guilty that I'm taking up too much of their time? You know, I feel like I've approached this in terms of like, how do I find love, and how do I have real friends? And the truth is, you have to be vulnerable with someone. And which sucks, and I know that I don't like to do it, and you have to do emotional labor, right? In order to In order to have friends, you have to also be a friend. So I guess there's like the starter answer of first of all, make sure you're getting out of your room. Make sure you're not in your dorm or your apartment or whatever. Like, go do things. If things sound even remotely interesting to you, go do them. If there's an event that sounds cool, or a club, or a gathering of some kind, you should go, because people who have shared interests and shared passions are obviously they're like the low-hanging fruit of friendship. So especially in college where the opportunities are everywhere, join something, go do something, and make sure that you are, I think part of what establishes a strong friendship, you can obviously have friends on the internet, but it can be difficult. Sometimes you just want someone you can go to the grocery store with, or go get coffee with, or the friends that we have in high school, I think they feel a certain way because they just slot into your normal everyday life. And so I think that there is a meaningful, valuable aspect to having people who share physical space with you. So put yourself in that space. I guess the whole theme of this is be brave. Olivie says so. But you do have to be brave enough to go do things by yourself, because that's how you'll meet people. And go to things that are interesting to you, even if you are nervous about them being dorky or weird, because you know what? The other people who like that thing are probably gonna like you. And then, yeah, so that's step one, is put yourself physically in the place where you might meet someone, which is a lot harder than it sounds, I know, because you could just be in bed reading a book, I know. But if you want friends, if you want connection with other people, you have to put yourself with other people. And the other thing is, yeah, you have to be vulnerable. I think that platonic chemistry is a lot like romantic chemistry, where you kind of know when you feel it. Oh, this person's really cool. I really like this person. I feel like I can be the best version of myself with this person. And then you invest in that. You invest in that feeling. Don't play games with this person. If they contact you, if they text you, text them back. Don't make them, I think you just, two-part equation. Put yourself in the place where a friend would be. The kind of friend that you want. And then be the kind of friend that you want. And it's not a foolproof system, but it's the best I can do for you. And this video is so long. So my tour events are available. You can buy tickets via my website. Please come hang out with me. I love to have friends. Yeah, actually, a lot of people do meet their friends at my events. So just saying. This has been me, Olivie Blake, not writing, and I'll see you next time.